So, good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for your patience. As mentioned earlier, we're still awaiting the arrival of MEP Sokol. The perpetual issue of Brussels rush hour traffic is delaying him by a few minutes, but he should be with us presently. But a very warm welcome, first and foremost, and also to our 300-odd viewers who are joining us online for the Science, Business, Health and Life Science Conference, the first time that we've kind of focused a dedicated event on the interface between latest health legislation and regulation and the world of research and innovation, which of course is the domain that Science Business is best known for. And for those of you who are a little less familiar with our core activities, we're Europe's leading media company with a specialization on science, tech and innovation policy. We have an international news service that goes out to an audience of about 30,000 twice a week with latest developments in research and innovation policy, funding and programs. And that is supported by a network of 75 leading science and tech organizations, funding, performing and policy. And so we have this very unusual niche in the world of European research and innovation, bringing together the worlds of research, industry and policy for interesting discussions about what's happening in the political context and what that will mean for science and technology in the years to come. Now, as many of you are aware, the choice of theme for today's conference, Health Innovation and the Future of Medicines Development, is an acknowledgement that we are at a crossroads in Europe. We have the general pharmaceutical legislation revisions proposals from the Commission, which are now passing through review at the European Parliament and later the Council, and potentially defining the next 20 years of medicines development in Europe. And so the purpose of today's event is, again, to focus a bit more on the research and innovation side of things, how that will be influenced by the outcomes of the regulatory revision, the directive revision, and what the member states and the EU collectively agree on as the future of medicines development in Europe. So we've got a great agenda ahead of us. I won't run through it in detail because you all have it on your badges. But just to say that, that we're going to extend this opening session until about 10:40, a slightly shorter coffee break, and then we'll move on to our parallel sessions, the one on pandemic preparedness in this room, and the one on AMR upstairs on the second floor. Okay, so Mr. Sokol is apparently getting his microphone wired up, so I managed to kill enough time for him to join us. Tomislav, great to see you. If you'd just like to take your seat at the end of the stage. So, first of all, thanks again for joining us. Congratulations on making it through the Leopold Tunnel and across the bridge. Always a logistical challenge at this time of the day. But again, thanks very much for being here. Thank you also to our supporters, Novartis and the Science Business Network, for helping to make this event possible. And I suggest that we get on with the discussions and our opening plenary, which is focused on the interface between regulatory frameworks and health innovation in Europe. And so, with perfect timing, I'm going to invite Mr. Sokol to take the stage first. Tomislav, we're at a very interesting time politically, as the Commission's proposals are now being discussed in Parliament, and then moving on to the Council. And so, first of all, could you just give us a very quick summary of where we are and what happens next, and then we'll ask you in a little more detail about what you think about the latest reports and recommendations for the next steps.
Okay, is it working?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. First, thank you for inviting me. So I think this is perfect timing because yesterday was the deadline, the last deadline for tabling amendments. So on Monday for the regulation and yesterday for the directive. So now all the political groups have stated their positions through amendments, and now we have to wait for these amendments to be sorted out, systematized, and then negotiations start. So the procedure is that we'll first start the technical negotiations on the technical level between the political groups, so at the beginning of December, and then we'll see whether, but probably we'll have one political meeting, political negotiations between the rapporteurs also before Christmas. And then we'll know more about what are the differences, what are the challenges, etc. Even though I can say from the point of view of my my file, the regulation, where I'm the shadow rapporteur. I already see where the biggest differences are between me and the rapporteur. So it's the sandboxes, it's the voucher, the incentives for orphan drugs, high unmet medical needs. So there are big differences between the two biggest political groups, between us, the EPP, and the S&D. So I expect this to be pretty complicated negotiations, I would say. The objective is to have the first reading in the Parliament finished before elections. So there is no way to start the trialogue before that. So the schedule is that we have the vote in ENVI maybe end of March, something like that, and then in the very last plenary before elections to have the vote in the plenary. This also won't be easy to achieve because, as I said, there are big differences. These are very complicated files. We have two files, directive and regulation. So there will be also a lot of technical work. Also, some of us are working on the European health data space as well, which is also connected with innovation and etc., where the trialogues should start also pretty soon. So this is more advanced file. So it won't be easy, but yeah, without going too much into content, it is possible to make it, but a lot of depend on the two rapporteurs. The Pernil Weiss, who is a rapporteur for the directive from the EPP, from my political group, and Timo Volken, the S&D, he is the rapporteur for the regulation around the EPP shadow rapporteur. So it really, a lot of will depend on their teams, so what kind of pace they will try to set, whether we are able to finish in time. So the idea is to finish the first reading in the Parliament before elections, to give the mandate for negotiations for after the elections, because after April we'll probably lose 6 to 7 months at least before the whole process can start again, because we'll have the elections, the campaign, the election of the new commission, etc. So after the elections, I don't expect anything to restart before October, let's say.
Okay, well that's very good to know. Obviously the two reports, or the sets of recommendations that have been tabled on the regulation and the directive by MEPs Volken and Weiss, take somewhat diametrically opposed positions, right? So from your perspective, I mean, what are the aspects in the two reports that we have on the table for negotiation that really hold the prospect of strengthening the health and life science innovation ecosystem in Europe? And which aspects are you most concerned about?
Yeah, I mean, these differences are differences between our political groups. So these are not just personal differences, because my amendments on the regulation are also diametrically opposite, as I said, to Timo Volken's report. So he wants to delete the voucher. We want to retain the voucher, but improve it. He wants to introduce European Medicines Facility, some kind of new agency, which we do not believe is the best way, because it does not have a clear mandate, clear funding, clear objectives. So this is kind of idea that he put there, just floating around, but we don't see what is the added value of that. He wants to delete the sandboxes, which should be kind of, I think, something very positive for the innovation, so that we can, in a more flexible environment, try to test some solutions. We want to also retain it. And on the incentives, I think the idea of the EPP is to strengthen the incentives that we already have now. I mean, not in the Commission's proposal, which also goes below in terms of the baseline, but on what is now in force, to retain at least that level of incentives, and then to add on top of that the modulation. So in those areas like orphan drugs, where we think that our pediatric drugs, where we think that there are gaps that we need to fill, where we believe that we need extra incentives. So that is our position. So the position of the S&D is to reduce the incentives. Elections are coming up, so I can understand where that's coming from. But our position is that we want to stimulate innovation, that we want to retain the baseline, which is important because of legal certainty and predictability for the companies, and then to add this modulation on top in those areas where I think that more additional incentives and more additional action and investment is required. So yes, I mean, these are very, very different positions, but I think that of course, in the end, it will be some kind of a compromise, but I believe that we have good arguments, and that the final reports will reflect more our position than theirs.
Very good. Well, it's, as always, a question of watch this space in Brussels. Lots of negotiations ahead. So thank you very much for setting the context. I'm delighted that we are also joined by 4 very eminent guests from different parts of the the health life science ecosystem to discuss where we are in the proposals and what the broader implications are for the regulatory innovation interface. So just running through the panel from my left to right. First of all, Lilia Luchianov, who is policy officer working on medicines policy authorization and monitoring at DG SANTE at the European Commission. Janina Dzambazoska, who's the head of regulatory affairs in Europe for Novartis. Arjon van Hengel, who's deputy head of unit with DG Research and Innovation at the Commission, with a broad remit for various health files, including the Innovative Health Initiative. And last but by no means least, we're very pleased to have Sokol Ruiz join us online from Madrid. Sokol is the head of Biologics, Biotechnology and Advanced Therapies for the Spanish Agency of Medicines and Medical Devices. So Sokol, it's a pleasure to have you with us. Thank you for joining. So we're going to take the next sort of 30, 40 minutes just to talk about different stakeholder perspectives on where we are, what comes next, and a broader view on to what degree the proposals are likely to foster breakthrough innovation in health life sciences in Europe in the years to come. Janina, I'm going to start with you. Let's hear a voice from industry on where you think we are and what fundamentally, from Novartis' perspective, but the broader health life sciences sector, what do you think the regulatory frameworks for the future in Europe need to deliver to enable the sectors to retain their competitiveness and to harness their full innovation potential?
Thank you, Simon. So basically, I first want to acknowledge that what we're trying to achieve here is, with the revision of the pharmaceutical legislation, something that will define how our healthcare ecosystem will function for the next 20 years. So the stakes are extremely high. And in the end of it, it's patients. We are all patients. Every single one of us here benefits from treatments. So really, we should be focused on fostering innovation, fostering predictability on the system, and ultimately delivering medicines to patients as soon as possible. So I think the speed is also important. When I talk about speed, it's not just the speed, but the agility. Our system in Europe is at the moment functioning well. There are always things to be improved, to be future-proofed. And the Commission has made an attempt, and I'm talking purely about the regulatory processes here and the regulatory implications, to further the system. However, I have to say that there is still a lot of opportunities out there. For example, so I want to first come back to some of the amendments that are the current taking place in the Parliament, and I think Dr. Sokol alluded to some of them. I want to allude specifically to an amendment proposed by the by the rapporteur, actually, for the regulation about setting a uniform standards for clinical trials and for development. I just want to put this straight forward. I think that is opposite of what you just asked me, and I think it's complexities like that we need to avoid. That is entirely unworkable if you take how drug development works. Research is unfortunately not simple. You go and find something, but actually you find something else. That's how it works. And so I think setting uniform standards across all indications, all patient populations, all type of technologies, it's really an unachievable task, and it will lead to, how can I say, a lack of innovative treatments in Europe. I don't want to leave in 20 years when I will be retired and have to go for a treatment to Switzerland because they will have the innovative therapies and we will not. So I think, first of all, we need to ground ourselves in truth of how the drug development and the research works, which is really sometimes accidental, sometimes deliberate, and sometimes it's a byproduct of something else we find. And for every researcher knows that. And so I think we need to connect stronger there. We need to understand how can we have a legislation that provides the flexibility, fosters collaboration, but yet at the same time, it's not so prescriptive that we stop treatments being developed for innovative treatments being developed for patients, especially for the smaller populations, orphan, or even more so, populations that do not meet the requirements of the orphan, but are relatively small therapeutic area diseases. And provisions like that to set uniform standards across the whole of the drug development, it's not possible, in my view.
Super. Okay, so I think we're going to loop back on a couple of these. a little later in the conversation. We're going to turn to Sol in a couple of minutes to ask about the National Medicines Agency perspective on all of this. But first, Dr. Sokol, you want to add something? And then also Arjon and Lilia, if you have any first thoughts or comments on...
Something. A bit of an exclusivity, because I table amendments which concretely go in that direction. What was mentioned. So what I'm proposing is specifically to allow the possibility to have marketing authorization procedures at the same time for different indications. And also we are trying to extend the possibilities for the prime. So because my position, I was communicating this even before the proposals came out, is that if we were able to have this faster and simpler authorization procedure during the pandemic for vaccines, and if it fulfilled the standards of safety, why not use it in other cases as well? So if we just remove some unnecessary administrative bureaucratic additional steps, then why don't use the same approach also broader? So if it worked for the vaccines, why shouldn't it work for other medicines as well? So specifically, my amendments go in the direction that was mentioned, to be definitely more flexible, to be more, how should I say, adapted to real life and real needs, and not to be so bureaucratic and rigid as some of the colleagues who were mentioned before.
Thank you. Now, let me just turn very quickly to our two Commission colleagues on the panel. It's obviously a potentially sensitive to comment on political processes and negotiations as they move forward, but is there anything that really strikes you, perhaps Lilia first and then Arjon, from what you've heard in the opening remarks, that really stand out in terms of the areas that you see as being key priorities for boosting the broader innovation performance in Europe, what DG SANTE has been attempting to do with the proposals, DG RTD, in funding and supporting the R&I projects that aim to meet some of these objectives. Any first thoughts from you before we turn to Sol?
Yeah, maybe just to say that indeed, as you, with the caveat that you said that we cannot comment on the positions, because now it's in the hand of the co-legislators, so the decisions are going to be made in between the Parliament and the Council. However, what we can do, and we will keep doing, is explaining the draft, because on this draft, then the drafts are going to be built, so it has to be well understood and well coherent between the two acts, because as Mr. Sokol said, indeed, we really have to make sure that both regulation and directive work well together. So then, just to comment on a few points, however, I'm very happy to see that indeed innovation is brought to the forefront of the discussion, because for a while it was, as you explained as well, mainly about the regulatory data protection, which is a minor part, it's true, it's a very big important part for the industry, but it's a minor part in terms of the legislative content of the provisions. So I'm very happy that now the discussion really goes into more details, and of course thanks also to the work of the Parliament, who has been very active on that. As a drafter, a part of the team of drafters, and the person in lead now with the negotiations from the side of the Commission, of course, we are active. We are going to support, and we are doing it already, the Parliament and the Council and in their work, and we are happy to see that the discussion happens and starts, and with regards to the specific measures, maybe indeed, since both the positions are quite opposite, indeed, maybe at some point some middle ground will have to be found, and this middle ground might be somewhere close to what the Commission proposed or not, depending on the areas. And then I agree with I was very happy also to see that the Parliament agrees with the principles, and that's very important for the Commission. So the principles, that the objectives of the reform have not been challenged as such by the Parliament. On the contrary, they support that very much, and on that I'm very happy to hear.
Good. Arjon, any first thoughts from you before we turn to Sol?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the invitation. So I think this is a very important file, of course, and here we see that there are many different viewpoints, as already been clarified by my neighbor. And what we want to do here is put the patient central, and I think that is very essential here. And of course, that does not make every stakeholder happy over the full line. We understand that, and that's a logical consequence of that. But what we need to do is provide a framework that gives an amount of predictability, an amount of clarity to the stakeholders, and especially also the people in the research and innovation. So what is the way forward, and how can that be supported? It's also important to note that this is one element in relation to the research and development aspects. There are other aspects like the European Health Data Space, for instance, which is of relevance, and others that are all actually coming into connection with this, and that provides an equal landscape which is essential for the research and innovation. I think if we're talking about legislation, you provide a framework which is set for the long term. That is a good thing, but on the other hand, if you're talking about research and innovation, you also need to have a certain amount of flexibility, but to do that in a safe way. And for that reason, there are elements in it like the regulatory sandboxes, which provide a way to work together with these regulators and developers on how to move forward with new developments in the most safe way possible. So that in the end, the research and development advancement can be finding a way towards the patient and towards the market. And I think that is really the goal that we're trying to achieve here.
Very good. Okay, so let's turn now to the perspective of Sol Ruiz and the national medicines agencies, who, of course, have this unique position under the umbrella of the European Medicines Agency, but really at the interface between regulation, innovation, and population health needs. Sol, just to check, can you hear us? Fine. We're very pleased to have you back online.
Yes, very well.
Excellent.
So I can hear you well.
Okay, well, again, thank you very much for joining us. So I guess the main question to begin with, Sol, is, from the perspective of National Medicines Agency, do you feel that there are ways of really strengthening the clinical research and trial system in Europe? Are those being adequately addressed within the GPL proposals that are on the table? Is the system really broken? I mean, it seems that it's quite a high-performing system. The issues perhaps more on time of approval and post-market authorization. But from a national perspective, how's the system performing? What could be done to make it better, to increase the speed of innovation reaching patients?
Thank you. And first of all, good morning to everyone. Apologies as I could not be there, face to face. And thanks for inviting me here. Indeed, I mean, I think the system is working well. I mean, there are many areas where improvements have been introduced through the years. Some have been mentioned, early scientific advice, prime innovation office. But obviously, I mean, everything it's is subject to further improvement. So. I don't think, I mean, in terms of, obviously, as it's been mentioned, there will be additional measures introduced in the new revision of the legislation to improve innovation. But I think we've been already building through the last few years in initiatives, to already improve both innovation and access. And I mean, the EMA, for instance, has the innovation task force, but at the national level, we also have our innovation office, and we provide service, to everyone who comes for advice. But we have focused our efforts mainly also on academic developers and, doctors doing research at hospitals, etc. And that actually, I mean, it's been working, I would say, really well. I mean, Spain approved, had like 923 clinical trials approved last year. So it's, I think, it's in a leader position within the EU. And again, we provide all this scientific advice for academic developers for free as many times as they need. And I think, having a close contact from first-in-man clinical trials throughout the development is really helpful. And of course, I mean, I would agree with the comments that have been made, but also, I mean, we have to keep in mind that, yes, improving, access to, early access to patients is critical. but also we have to balance that with, benefit risk evaluation of the product. So obviously we want patients have access to innovative therapies, but at least with reassurance of some benefit and safety. So again, regarding clinical trials, I think obviously things can be improved. I mean, regulatory agencies, we can improve in cooperation, trust on each other regarding, evaluation of an application and improving efficiency. I mean, we have the CTIS and other initiatives, so we need to continue working on that to improve the efficiency and, reduce clinical trial approval time. But I think we have the tools. Obviously, we have to continue working on that. But hopefully, I mean, what I have seen from what is included in the revision of the legislation, I think it's in a very good direction. Thanks.
Okay, well, that's a positive message. I think it's always important to not necessarily focus on the negativity of regulatory controls. But Sol, I mean, we heard earlier from Janina, and I think it's a sentiment shared by the other members of the panel, that there's a growing need for speed and agility and flexibility within the system. Yet when we talked before the conference, you referenced the increasing demand on services and a sense that this is not limited to Spain, this applies across member states in Europe, that you're overburdened. So can you achieve the two? And if so, how?
Yeah, that is a million-dollar question. Because again, also as mentioned before, it's true that during the pandemic, we all managed to do, the best that we could to have vaccines accessible, in a very short time frame. But indeed, I mean, we cannot continue at that pace. I mean, just to give you an example, Spain was the rapporteur for several of COVID-19 vaccines. And we were receiving, documents to review on the 21st of December, 11:30 p.m. And we would have to, need the evaluation completed like, early January, like the 5th or 6th of January, and data that were, coming in, not at once as we normally have, but, on different cycles. So obviously that would be great. And I think we all the different agencies, commissions, et cetera, different parties, we collaborated to achieve a great thing. That was, to have vaccines available very soon. But obviously, we cannot do that. But I think the system has also proved that, when we have, robust, even if it's limited data, the system can be quick and with enough regulatory flexibility. Again, everything can be improved. But just to give you an example, some of the advanced therapies that we have already approved, I mean, the assessment was, if I remember correctly, like between 100 or 150 days. So that can be done. But for that also, we need the data from the applicant. Also, when, there's scientific advice, I mean, it would be great if, applicants would, adjust or accommodate the scientific advice as it was, because you can have, several cycles of scientific advice, but if then you do something else, we're confronted with a different set of data. So that is very important. And obviously from the side of the national agencies, we do need to have, enough trained staff. And talking maybe from the Spanish agency, but it's also the reality of other agencies. I mean, the difficulty to keep senior and experienced staff is, now it's a difficulty, and having enough flexibility to hire, highly trained people as we have. So we have to cope with that, and also, many activities, centralized procedures, clinical trials, advice, meetings. So all those we have to accommodate and try to do the best. So I think, I mean, also from our side, speaking from the Spanish agency, I think we have a, highly motivated and well-trained people who, of course, can confront all the innovation that is coming. But yeah, we need obviously to keep cooperating with applicants and all the stakeholders to have best and robust, even though limited data, to be able to allow flexibility. But I think also other initiatives that will be incorporated in the legislation will provide additional flexibility to some maybe manufacturing platforms, etc. So I think, yeah, I think I feel positive about the changes, even though, yeah, with the difficulties, but
there are challenges.
We'll have to, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Sol. We'll come back to you for some additional comments a little later in the session. But first, turning to the panel, the role of national medicines agencies, and also, I guess, the proposed revisions to the structure at the European Medicines Agency with a view to speeding up processes, accelerating assessments, evaluations. Do you see this moving in the right direction? Do you have any thoughts on what Sol has shared about the future role of medicines agencies in the regulatory innovation landscape? Okay, Dr. Sokol and then Janina.
Yeah.
Okay. On that, I think definitely the proposals go in the right direction. I mean, in terms of simplification, the reduction of the number of committees, we are actually aligned. That's one of the few areas where we are aligned with the S&D rapporteur that ad hoc working groups could be there to supplement the work, but ad hoc working groups, so not permanent. Also on reducing the deadlines, I think we have to be realistic there. So to reduce what is necessary, but not to overburden the system. This is why I was in close contact with EMA before tabling the amendments, so to make sure that we are also hear their position and that we are aligned with what is realistically possible. Also, one thing that, so I think in general on that, the proposal going in the good direction, I think it will be much easier to find an agreement on that, with, of course, some caveats and some differences and need to improve some things, but in general, yes. But of course, because we want things to be quicker, but also without jeopardizing the safety of the review and the quality of the review. So that's clear. One thing that, for instance, that I think that we could revise, I don't see any need at all for the Commission to be making the final decision. I think that it's my personal position that if the EMA does all the work, it can also make the final decision on the authorization. Of course, that's maybe too ambitious for now, so we are not proposing this, but I'm glad that the proposal actually cuts down the time for the Commission to make this final formal decision, and we are cutting it even further, so even to, I think, 6 days or something. So that is our proposal, because after EMA has done all the work, this last administrative part of Commission rubber stamping this, I think this is something that can really be done right away, in a very fast manner, so that we also can save time there. But so I think, so in general, yes, I think we are, in that sense, we are going in the right direction, and I think the end result will be that we definitely simplify and fasten things that can be, but without jeopardizing the overall quality of the process. And yes, and the last point, I mean, I cannot really talk a lot about national agencies because the organization is essentially the national competence, but the Parliament has always been open, and it will remain open to, if there is a need and necessity to strengthen EMA. Of course, now we gave EMA the increased mandate also relating to health threats as well. So definitely, I think that if we give it extra work, we should also provide it with extra funding, and this is something that we'll definitely look at during the next MFF revision.
Super, thank you very much. Janina, a quick comment from you, and then we're going to come to you,
I just want to comment that the stretch of the national health authorities, specifically assessors, who assess, new application is true and it's there, we see it. The system has been a bit stretched during COVID, but I think we are missing an opportunity here. 60% of all agency work, equally in industry, it's actually dealing with the burdensome procedural post-approval process, variations, just submission of things that you can implement before and then tell the agency, but you need staff. You need a lot of staff to process this massive amount of changes that go through the system. So the legislation has opened the possibility to do some of the changes through electronic portals or through databases, but the rapporteur for the regulation has said that we need to submit a sequence. As small as the two words mean, it means double work. That's what it means. We really need to think how we cut bureaucracy and how we take that massive amount of staff who does non-value added procedural work, simply just implementing changes, and redeploy them into innovation, into supporting the academia, the SMEs, continuous drug development from clinical research into registration. We need to truly think how to reduce the bureaucracy. I think that's one of the priorities and almost a missed opportunity. I know the variation legislation will be reopened, and we really need to take the opportunity there to remove the bureaucracy, because a lot of the efforts are wasted on all sides simply in that process. So, but we truly feel the strain that some countries do experience with assessors. So I just wanted to echo that.
Okay, thank you, Janina. Now, Lilia, turning to you next. A very quick comment, yes, and then we're going to talk about future-proofing and the GPL, but please, go ahead.
Yeah, so very quickly, but importantly, so to start with the last one on the variation, indeed, so that you know, a huge work is being already done in order to change the provisions as they are now, so before even the new legislation went into force. So that's already first step on variations. And once the new legislation is in force, then the variation regulation will be changed as well. So there are going to be at least 2 rounds of massive reworks done on the variation system. And the objective is really to simplify it to the maximum, but of course keeping the security of the patient as the main principle. The second point I wanted to mention is about the reduction of timelines. Indeed, we have done it in discussions with the national authorities as well as with EMA. We have thought it through. Every single step was calculated in order for it to be workable. And then the timeline is also reduced for the national authorities because it's for everybody. And we believe, though, that it's going to be workable because we didn't only propose to change the timelines without changing anything else. As Mr. Sokol said, we also changing the functioning, and there is more to it than just the committees. It's also about how you file, how you review, and we streamline those processes as well. So we believe that this is going to be workable, and this is going to be really an improvement. However, then, of course, then there is always the question of the assessors being available, not available. That's why we very much prefer to say that there is also a question of discussing upfront the programs of the companies, because we have received these comments from the authorities that the problem sometimes comes because many applications arrive at the same point on time. So some programming needs to be done on both sides. And the last point I wanted just to mention on that is that just to correct something that is very important, the Commission does not rubber stamp the opinion. The opinion comes as a scientific input that needs then to be translated into a legal act, and the legal act is a decision of the Commission, and there you have a legal safeguard and legal checks, including inter-service consultation, which is not just to say that it's a procedural, bureaucracy. It really implies people looking at it from different perspectives, and it's a responsibility of the Commission also as a follow-up. So if there is a problem, the Commission needs to defend it, so they need to be able to assess it, and every single point is actually indeed checked. It's not copy-paste in any way. So we reduced that timeline as well, again, calculating all these possible, elements. So, yeah, because it has to be brief.
Great. Okay, so we're going to... Go ahead, Tomislav.
Short comment. No, I agree. As the system is set now, yes, but it's also what I was saying is that that strengthening the capacities of EMA and giving it extra mandate, they could also do that. So that was the idea. So the legal check, etc., could also be done on the level of EMA if we change this. If we changed its mandate, gave it some extra capacity, etc. So I think that's also possible. But as we are not proposing that now, we knew that this would. I know that this would be too revolutionary at this stage, but this is just something to think about for the future.
Okay, well, we'll stick with the future topic, and Lilia, I think one of the biggest questions that has surrounded the whole process of revising the general pharmaceutical legislation is can Europe create a regulatory framework that will last for 10 or 20 years, and at the same time anticipate the pace and the potential direction of travel of fundamental research, of breakthrough innovation and science. Can we anticipate what comes in 10 or 20 years and create a system today that allows those breakthrough technologies and therapeutics to come to market to reach patients in a normal, expedited way. So what are your thoughts on that? How do you feel the GPL future-proofs the regulatory framework to foster innovation in Europe in these advanced next-generation technologies?
Yes, so indeed this objective of future-proofing and making innovation possible and happening actually was at the beginning, from the beginning, one of the main objectives of the reform. It has been maybe discussed less widely, but this is really one of the main points. So we did it. We indeed consulted a lot of people, not only EMA, but lots of stakeholders, and we try to understand what the challenges would be and then how to solve it. And then I will directly come to the solutions that we found and that we already proposed. So indeed, I'll start with the sandbox that has already been mentioned. We thought that the mechanism that would be there that would allow the system to function, if anything so groundbreaking new comes that it cannot actually fit into the existing system, this will still be possible. And then, of course, then you would say, but then you would authorize something in an illegal way, and that's exactly why the system proposes a very organized, systematic review by EMA based on a scientific assessment, and then a process of how you would assess it, and then a process of how you authorize it. All this, so a very, so to say, guarded testing environment. And that also would be restricted in time. So once you are fine with the regulatory process and you know that this product or technology rather, because it's going to be probably for new technology, needs this or this adjustment, then you will do the adjustment. And then later you would either translate this into normal marketing authorization, or you will use something else that we also propose, which is an adapted framework. So an adapted framework is another provision that we have where we say, for a system that really doesn't, for a technology that really doesn't fit the system as it is, we might basically organize a bit of a different system, and that's going to be done ad hoc. And then, of course, it's again with a lot of checks and balances. Even the member states will have a say there, because they are going to be viewing the products that we will be putting on the list for which this kind of products is possible. So there is a process that will safeguard the security of the patient, but also the innovation and the possibilities. So basically, we do not in any way want to be a bottleneck for the research and innovation to happen. Then another very important point you mentioned, maybe also the interplay with other technologies, because more and more a medicine is not simple medicine as we used to have it 20, 30 years ago. And it's going to be even more the case in the future. It's combined with other things. For example, medical devices, and we really made clear what would apply when and how, because this is extremely important for the developers to know, and also for the authorities to be able to deal with it. And it's not only for the medical devices, it can be for other products as well. We have an article that is really open to anything that would be new, that we have no even idea now, but in 5 years' time, it will be obvious. Maybe some artificial intelligence tool that is going to be not a medical device, but something else, maybe other products. And then we tell that the authorities will have a look at it and will check it in a way that is consistent with the safety and security of the patient objective, as well as with the innovation. And the last one I would want to mention there, maybe because indeed there are many more, and I could go for an hour. Maybe another one that is interesting is the platform technology that is also future. I mean, it's already happening now, but it's going to be even more in the future, where you have a part of the medicine that is set, and then another part that is actually dependent on the patient or on the pathogen, and this is something that we'll be able to authorize. So one of the parts of the medicine is going to be adapted every time. So this is a bit of a science fiction in certain aspects now, but it will become reality very soon, and we hope it's going to be developed in Europe. Yeah.
So if we just pause there, because I'm really pleased you also mentioned the platform technologies, what we call the interface between the 3 Ds, right? Drugs, devices, digital. Because I think certainly, Janina, you had a few thoughts on this question of optimizing the synergies or identifying the overlaps between different pieces of legislation. Perhaps we'll come to you for a couple of thoughts in a moment. But first, I'd also like to turn back to Sol, Ruiz in Madrid, if I can. Sol, you know, in your scientific capacity, you've been working for years on ATMPs, right, and cell and gene therapies, and part of this sort of wave of next generation technologies that are coming to market. So I just wondered if you had any particular thoughts on this, about whether or not the, you know, the regulatory proposals at the moment are creating the right environment for these next generation therapeutics and technologies to come through the pipeline and to reach patients in Europe in an expedited and safe way.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you. Thanks. And I would say yes. I mean, from also the comments that Lilia was mentioning, I think indeed, I mean, you know, we're going to see obviously in the field of advanced therapies, but also as she mentioned, you know, combination with medical devices, new technologies. So I think the current framework could already accommodate, you know, some of, you know, those combinations, but indeed we need maybe more cooperation between the different, you know, agencies involved in the assessment, so we can, you know, cooperate and work together in a way that when the product comes for marketing authorization, you know, we can do the work, you know, as quick as possible. But I think yes, I mean, from what I've heard and you know, from what is proposed, I think yes, the system will increase the flexibility to accommodate the situation. So in that sense, I think I see it quite positively. But again, the work, it has to be also within us to talk to each other, the different parties involved, in terms of you know, getting to a good you know, harmonized approach and you know, allow this to happen, you know, as quickly as possible. Thanks.
Great, and I guess in that regard also an optimization of the CETIS knowledge transfer system will be a big help to agencies and regulators. Janina, any immediate thoughts on this sort of interoperability and the interfaces between different pieces of legislation?
Yeah, I just want to come to what you just said previously about this interoperability, and we don't even know what the future looks like. So obviously the sandbox will be an excellent tool to explore what we don't know today. But what we know today is that we do have drug devices, in vitro diagnostic combinations, and when we develop those, we really need to start thinking early, cohesively across the whole spectrum of what these technology/products are. So the scientific advice, for example, at EMA level should be opened to bring those elements together versus us going to individual bodies and getting opposite or contradictory advice on the same topic. So that's absolutely critical. And to that point, I just want to call for strengthening that collaboration and giving EMA the remit to consult other bodies, such as the notified bodies in the context of these new technologies or combination products or in vitro diagnostics. But I think the interoperability is going to be critical, I think.
Super.
Forward.
Dr. Sokol, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, I'm glad that, again, I can say that some of these things we address in my amendments. That is, so I specifically propose that we extend the sandboxes also to other medical technologies outside of medicines as well. So even in a clearer and very explicit way when compared to the Commission proposal. So actually we are already addressing that very issue, that we need to be flexible in a broader sense and also to try to bring all of these different technologies together. So definitely this is precisely what we are doing from my side. And on the future proofing, I mean, to be perfectly honest, once this legislation is enforced, it will not be changed in 15 to 20 years, just because of the fact that how hard it is to change your legislation. So first you need to have a Commission proposal, which needs to, before that you need to have all of these steps, impact assessment, etc., that lasts for years. Then you have this whole burdensome and complicated process of adopting legislation through Council and the Parliament, and then you have the implementation. So nobody will do that for some minor changes. So the only way to go through all of this again is to have a major revision, a need for a major revision. So definitely, so next 15 to 20 years we're stuck with this. What we do now. So this is why we have to get it right. One possibility is also to give more power to the Commission to adopt implementing delegated acts. But there you always have a problem. I will be perfectly honest that the Parliament is usually reluctant to allow for this because the Parliament usually sees this as giving too much power to the Commission then. And here we'll have to find the balance But because this definitely allows for flexibility, because Commission can react to implementing acts much faster than if you have to change the whole legislation. But then the question is this institutional balance, which fortunately or unfortunately, I leave it to you, we always also need to take into consideration. So, but from my side, I understand the need for flexibility, and I'll advocate that this is reasonable, that the Commission has reasonable powers to change some things, but we'll have to find a balance. It will not be easy, because there are some groups in the parliament who would just like to prohibit everything and put everything on the level of primary legislation. But as you said, it's not workable if we want to change with the dynamic and how things evolve in the real life. If we want to be able to adapt to that, we also have to give the Commission this possibility to also act without changing the whole legislation.
Great, thank you. Now, Arjon, you've been waiting very patiently. I was coming to you next. Do you want to make a quick comment before I ask the next question?
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Because I think what we're looking at here is now, are we creating something that allows us to be in a better position in 10 years, to get the new solutions reaching the market and the patients? For that, of course, we need to have research and innovation. And research and innovation, first of all, you have not a guaranteed outcome. You're trying something and there are many failures on the way. There are also unexpected developments that you have to take into account that can help you to move forward with this. If I give you an example, the COVID-19 vaccines, the mRNA vaccines, we've been supporting that with EU money over many years actually, but nobody had the idea that it would really make this impact in the end. It's a novel type of technology. On the other hand, we've also supported technologies that failed, and that's just the way it is. What we have to do is make sure that we set up a system that supports research and innovation to give many opportunities to the different technologies and the different developments at the same time. And only if we do that, we stand a chance that in the end, something comes through that is really going to be of benefit for the patients.
So in that wider context, Arjon, I mean, to what degree can Horizon Europe support in this process? Because, of course, we have the health cluster under Pillar 2. There are other funds on Pillar 3, European Innovation Council and elsewhere. But it's a huge number of projects that are being funded. How to create some kind of effective synergies and knowledge sharing between these, and not just within DG Research, but also with other stakeholders, with other parts of the Commission. How can we capture that knowledge and bring it into the broader questions about the innovation ecosystem for the future?
That's a very important question, because indeed we have to look at the development and the research landscape, and that starts at the early phases and it reaches the market and the patients in the end. So for us, the legislation that is now proposed by the Commission is a very important part to get these products to the patients. But of course we have to look at the stages before, because what the Commission is funding and what the EU is supporting in terms of research and innovation also includes the early stages. We have to invest into what I would call the foundation of the research and innovation to build upon and to actually finally come with the products and the solutions that are going to reach the patients. So we have to look at the support along this whole value chain of research and innovation until it reaches the patients. So for that, we are taking into account developments in many different areas. So we are looking at the clinical development, we are looking at the preclinical development of medicine and diagnostics as well, of course. So there are novel technologies, novel opportunities that are coming along. We have, for instance, I'll give you an example, the preclinical development of medicines. We're using a lot of animals in that. We want to change that because an animal is not a human, so it's not. We want to reduce the suffering of animals, but we also want to get better tools, actually, better systems to detect the safety of the products that are in development. And as I said, animal models are not always the optimal one. So that is one element. We are also working on novel setups of clinical trials, which is necessary in some cases. So you can set up a platform trial, which is a novel way of doing that. But you have to work together with regulators on making sure that that is done in a way that it's appropriate and that it's accessible for regulators to really look at the safety and the efficacy elements of such a clinical trial. We're working in areas where it's really difficult to have clinical trials. If I'm talking about rare diseases where you just have a few patients, this is a challenge. But this is also an area where there are no solutions for patients often. So there is a very high unmet medical need in that area. These patients are going around doctors and hospitals for a long time to find out what is actually wrong with them. If they do find out, because there's poor diagnostic in that area, if they do find that out, then there's often no medicine also. So what we want to do is support the medicine development in that area via different elements. So we have, for instance, the Innovative Health Initiative, which is working together between the companies, so large companies, small and medium-sized enterprises in different sectors of the health care. So that's the pharmaceutical area, the diagnostics, the medtech area, also the imaging and data area, because we see that there's a necessity to integrate these different elements. We have to take into account advances in different areas and try to learn from each other there, so really see a supplementarity. So in that way, we're working together between academics and industry in this public-private collaboration. We're also working directly with member states, because if we want to make progress here, we have to work together with our partners, and that also includes the national authorities. So, for instance, again, the rare diseases, we'll soon have a partnership that is co-funded by the European Commission as well as the national member states to develop new medicines and to create a more optimal ecosystem in the area of rare diseases. This includes also funding clinical trials. So we want to make sure that we are supporting the research and innovation from the start till the end.
Okay, fantastic. So we have just over a minute left before we pause for coffee. I'm going to just ask members of the panel, maybe one headline statement. What would be the greatest ambition, the key thing that we need to achieve in the next few months? By the time this current political cycle ends, where do you hope we're going to be by next summer? Maybe Dr. Sokol, let's start with you.
I mean, as I said, I think we finished the first reading in the Parliament and give the mandate for negotiations. And I think that the main added value of this whole thing should be that we really address the areas where we have the biggest gaps. If 95% of patients who are suffering from rare diseases do not have any treatment, so this is something that we need to address. If we have the problem of children and not having medicines for children, so especially and there is a big gap there with pediatric medicines, I think this should really be the focus, and that we should do whatever we can to incentivize and make it easier to have innovation, research, and the creation of new medical technologies there. So I think that this should be the main added value of this whole reform, and I think that we incentivize and stimulate innovation, but in those areas where we need them the most, where patients need them the most.
Very good. Sol Ruiz, final comment from you, very quickly.
Thank you. Thanks so much. No, I think, I mean, obviously we can, we have to continue cooperating and having a dialogue, continuous dialogue between the different stakeholders. We can continue improving efficiency and having increased flexibility, but in general, as I mentioned, I feel very optimistic about this review, and I think, it's a very good environment for innovation, but also for accessibility to new medicines for patients in the EU. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Sol. Lilia, penultimate comment?
Yeah, so where would be we would be in 6 months. I hope indeed that the Parliament will have the first reading by April. We really are going to be supportive of this, and then with the Council, the work is going to start. So I also hope that the Member States, the rotating presidencies, are going to invest a lot of their effort into this project. We know already that the Spanish and the Belgian presidencies that are the one that is coming next, the Belgian ones, are into the project very much, and then to keep from it the essence of what of that the Commission wanted, and then what indeed now I see that the actors want as well, which is indeed access, but also innovation, affordability, and also there are elements that we didn't mention but were very, very important, to prevent shortages and have the security of supply, also to increase to increase the check of the impact on the environment. That's an important thing. And maybe last one, something that we have not mentioned but is very close to our hearts as well, is the fight against the antimicrobial resistance. That is one of the next threats, one of the biggest. So all of this we hope will be safeguarded in the proposal and indeed translated into a position that is acceptable to both the Parliament and the Council. Of course, not in the next 6 months, but at least for the first, work on it. So.
Excellent. Janina, final word.
Yeah, so I think obviously 6 months is a long time ahead, but not so long given the pace of the institution is not, as you're saying. But I think the Parliament has really had a very speedy reading of this file. I just want to say that the file is so complex and so technically detailed that we haven't even focused on the details. There are details in there that maybe like not massive when you look at it, and I'll give you an example. Article 76 talks about insurance in clinical trials. 3 words are there, that insurance needs to be provided obviously for the safety of the subjects and the conduct, environment, and as well third party. Now, no insurer is going to insure anything that has a legislative provision like that, because what does that mean? So I think I just want to say, I hope we'll get to the details, because for all the big topics we discussed, there is so much detail that also matters. And I think that's why my expectation would be that in the next phase, we get to some of these details that may be roadblocks, unintended possibly.
Grains of sand in the machine. Potentially.
Potentially.
Okay, well, listen, thank you ever so much to Tomislav, to Arjon, to Janina, to Lilia, and of course to Sol Online. Thank you. We are going to pause now for a quick coffee break. I think we'll...